What up, what up, what up? It is Thursday, February 20th, exactly 30 days since President Trump assumed office for the second time. A lot has happened since then, executive orders, new policies, rolling back of old policies. And so here to talk about a lot of it, not all of it, because a lot has happened, is Jared Loggins, a professor of Black Studies and Political Science at Amherst College in Amherst, Massachusetts. Jared is joining us from Boston, though. Hey, Jared, welcome back. Thanks for coming again.
Hello, hello. I'm happy to be here.
Woohoo! Thanks so much. You were a fan favorite during our last conversation. And so let's get into it again. I want to give you some approval ratings to set the scene. As of February 19th, President Trump's approval rating is 49.1% and 45.8% disapprove of how he's handling the job. This is according to ABC News's 538 polling. So it seems to almost be a 50-50 split. What's your general takeaway of how President Trump has been doing these first 30 days?
Oh, I mean, he's running through the federal government with the sledgehammer. Um, the Trump administration, and really, I should say the Musk administration, is currently running their like a bull in a china shop. Musk, with Trump's consent, has promised to reduce what he is calling wasteful spending by cutting the entire workforce by two-thirds. We're talking about 3 million workers. If his plan is brought to fruition, we're talking about reducing the federal workforce to down to 1 million workers, and probably even less than that. 40% of the federal workforce are identify as part of a racial or ethnic minority group. 18% of those are Black, 10% are Hispanic or Latino. So far, he is targeted I guess the main kind of agencies that he's targeted so far is USAID, the Social Security Administration, the Department of Education, the General Services Administration, and HHS. Although um, he has set his sights on the Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security. Um, and that's just where things stand right now. But as it seems to be the case, um, they're going to keep pressing and keep pushing to eliminate and cut as many jobs at the federal level as they possibly can. And we are just talking about the federal workforce.
Right.
The other situation have to do with federal grants.
Mm.
So far, the Trump Musk administration has promised that they are going to go through grants, federal grants, with a fine tooth comb and slash as much of those grants as they possibly can.
Yeah. So I have some things on the layoffs and the spending cuts and all that for a little bit later. But first, I wanted to point out that the approval rating significantly dives when it's Black adults specifically being polled. So according to the latest Pew Research study, 19% of Black adults approve of how Trump is handling the job. What does that discrepancy between everyone else is thinking this, but Black adults is thinking this indicate to you?
It's not just that Trump is and the Musk administration are promising to cut the federal workforce and to slash sort of federal spending on any number of programs. They're doing it through the lens of fighting against diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it needs to be emphasized that this is simply a signifier, a catch-all for the fact that his administration really is taking issue with the diversification of the country. It's showing up I mean, the federal cuts, the cuts in grant spending, the fact that they're targeting public education, higher education right now, by targeting admissions, um, targeting now. They've been saying that they want to come after curriculum They want to come after, what folks are doing in the classroom. Their philosophy is a racist one, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. I think it helps to explain why Black folk are registering higher levels of disapproval. No one wants to be the target of
Right.
this. No one wants to be the target of this, right?
Right.
And at the same time, um, Black folk have often been the barometers uh, of sort of national the barometers of discontent. And I think now we're seeing and I hope that we're going to continue to see more disapproval and protests with these policies. Um, I'm I'm worried about what this is going to um, mean in terms of our ability as a country to develop and build a kind of political response.
Mm.
Everything is happening so fast and so
Yeah.
quickly.
Yep.
And the tendency in our country, because we're already so individuated, and is that, when attacked, sometimes people tend to just kind of close ranks
Mhm.
and hunker down. And I think now more than at any point in this country's long history of protest traditions, we have to find ways and opportunities to connect different struggles and come together. So for example, I've been thinking about um, Trump's assault on immigration, and the kind of typical story is that Trump is coming after Hispanics and Latinos, undocumented Hispanics and Latinos. And the reality is, um, this will have an effect on the immigrant population in this country broadly. I mean, just look at what was happening back in November before Trump was elected with the rhetoric that JD Vance and Trump were perpetuating around Haitian immigrants.
Right.
It's going to intensify, and I think the situation requires that we take a multi-pronged approach, that we think about the most vulnerable within any sort of group or community, and figure out how to protect those people. I've also been concerned about um, the attacks on trans folks. Black trans people face um, high levels of violence and abandonment. I mean, we just saw the case of Sam Norquist, was brutally murdered. That is only, sadly, I fear that is only going to intensify, precisely because the state, the official mouthpiece, right, from the bully pulpit, the president of the United States, is perpetuating the idea that Black trans people more broadly are nothing, that they must be exterminated and eliminated from society. We have to press against that. So this is all to say that, I see the Black disapproval rating as a barometer, and I think we all need to be taking cues and asking questions about what the source of that discontent is.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about the political scene right now. We've seen the 50-50 split before under a Trump administration. And since September, I've been interviewing dozens of voters, Republicans, Democrats, all Black. They all go back to the economy. They care about what is the response to DEI? Of course, the Democrats want, let's continue these policies, and the Republicans like, yeah, no. But starting with the bread and butter issue of the economy, this is a key issue that Trump ran on and why his voters supported him. Um, and the gag is inflation was at 3% last month, 2.9% in December. But it doesn't feel like it, Jared. I literally just went to the grocery store and it was $300. Why don't we feel the low inflation rate?
Back in November, as the campaigns were pressing, making their points to voters, making their appeal to voters. Um, there were the inflation was the big issue. You were polling, you look at kind of polling data from AP and a number of other different polling firms who were who were showing that it was inflation, it was the economy.
Yeah,
And I think, on one level, um, people are inclined to blame the person in office, to blame political leadership for inflation, even though the the causes are um are macro and often extend beyond anything that a particular administration is doing. That being said, um, you know, the Trump administration, they ran on the idea that they were going to immediately affect,
right.
a reduction in prices. You don't have to worry. Egg prices are going to go down. Gas prices are going to go down. Fascinatingly, after the inauguration, actually, maybe this was just a few weeks ago,
Hmm.
Trump, in a press gaggle, he says, uh, "Oh, prices may well go up. You may well feel the pinch."
The eggs I just got was $14 and it hurts.
It,
So,
it hurts. So, but it's just interesting how he transitions from
mm,
the Biden administration is responsible for inflation to, as president of the United States, you have to understand that prices may in fact go up.
yeah, when the campaign trail, he said the opposite the whole
He
time.
said the opposite. And now we're in a situation where I think um voters, just American citizens are it is an open question as to whether um Trump is going to be blamed for the economic situation that we are facing, that's going to unfold in this country in the next year. And I say this because of some of the facts of political polarization. It's
Yeah.
not clear that Trump supporters in particular are going to place the blame at his feet.
Yeah. And I think I'm confused because, as you said, and as is well documented, he ran on an economy platform. And I guess when he vowed to shrink the spending, no one thought he was going to lay off all these government employees. Like, does taking it that route at all impact his approval rating, like you were just suggesting?
It remains to be seen.
Okay.
Anecdotally, CNN, MSNBC, in particular, have ran segments interviewing Trump supporters who, in one way or another, are expressing, some of them are expressing buyer's remorse.
Mm,
Something to the effect of, um, I didn't know that when Trump said DEI, when Trump said he was going to, drain the swamp, I didn't think he meant me.
right.
I think he was talking about me. And so there, it is an open question as to whether, just to what extent, are folks who voted for Trump going to connect the dots, or I mean, it's, and the reason I say it's an open question is because I've also seen um, some evidence that Trump supporters basically saying this is unfortunate, it's unfortunate that I lost my job. It's unfortunate I've been caught up in spending cuts and grant freezes. But if it is what needs to be done, it is what needs to be done.
That's the vibe that I heard because I covered the inauguration from DC and I spoke to Black Trump supporters specifically. And I asked them, like, is there anything that he does that you disagree with? And they overwhelmingly said, no, whatever the plan is, I'm for it. And I'm not sure the blind allegiance is healthy. Usually, even if you like a politician, there are still some points of criticism, something, right? But in that case, it was like, whatever he's down for, we're following him. And I think that sense of allegiance may be why the response you just described is becoming more popular. Um, While we're on the economy, I also wanted to touch on the unemployment rate. So it was 4% in January, and then 4% overall in January. But for Black people, it was 6.4%. Now, some people say, oh, that's only a 2.4% difference. But Jared, what's in that 2.4% difference?
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of workers. We're talking about people who will be forced into irregular employment. Um, we're talking, by which I mean folks who will be pressed into the gig economy, for example, who will increasingly turn to Uber and Lyft, who will increasingly turn to these are jobs that do not carry benefits. So we're talking about folks, hundreds of thousands of people who not only are going to lose their jobs, but they're going to lose the benefits that are necessary to make sure that they're healthy and that when they get sick, that they have the resources to get healthy.
Yeah.
It's a situation. I mean, we you know this that when there's a saying that when America experiences a cold, Black America experiences the flu. I mean, this is where we are, and I think what this means in part is, um, you know, we have to find ways to strengthen and grow mutual aid networks to care for our neighbors in the absence of state abandonment. We're approaching a situation where, I mean, the whole social safety net may well come completely unraveled and undone, and we have to stand in the gap. Now, the thing is, historically speaking, uh, Black folk there's a history of Black folks doing exactly that, of standing in the gap of official abandonment, and I think we need to sort of think carefully and deliberately about um, how to stand in the gaps, how to support our neighbors who are going to face and continue to face the brunt of economic changes.
One thing about community care, it has showed up decade after decade, especially when there's moments within the government that just flop. I was trying to think of a more professional
No,
word.
no,
Flop.
no, that's right. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So knowing this about the economy, the inflation rate, the unemployment rate, they're not at rates that are particularly concerning yet. But continuing down the path that we're on, are we headed towards a recession? Ooh, I know the R word.
That's what the economists say.
Okay.
I think the situation that we face, and for all the talk about we're headed into a recession, that inflation stands to increase.
Right.
The reality is, folks, and to a point that you already made, are feeling the effects of the fragile of a fragile economy already.
Right.
You take the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate, you're right, it stands at for Black folk at 6%,
6.4. Yep.
6.4%. Um, Many people have more than one job,
Right.
are struggling to make ends meet, are
Yep.
struggling to keep up with the cost of housing and healthcare, if they have healthcare at all. Um, Rent prices are not seeing a reduction. I mean, there was a glimpse, like at the height of the pandemic, which I thought was an interesting kind of thing that was happening in the country, where at the height of that crisis, um, we were saying rental freezes, for example.
Right.
We're seeing a number of different kind of social safety net provisions that were kind of arising in this emergency
Right.
circumstance. And um, so we're that's that is not going to happen this go around. Republicans don't want it. The Trump administration does not want to do that. In fact, it seems that they want a crisis. the Trump administration has said prior to back in November, Musk was reported in all over the place that Musk wanted to, his dream, his goal is to destroy the economy.
How would that benefit them? That's where they lose me.
Oh, devalue the dollar so that they can so that crypto they
Oh, okay.
so that they can expand the their investments in crypto.
Okay. Do you think Musk is really running things? You brought him up a couple times.
He's president.
Mm,
There was a funny moment where um his son, so which I mean just the image. I don't know if you there was like a press conference or something, and Musk was standing next to the Resolute desk. Trump is sitting down. He's kind of, his shoulders are kind of hunched over,
hmm.
and he looks pitiful. And here's Musk who's standing up with his son
Right.
over his shoulders, and he's dictating terms. And there was this interesting moment during that during that press conference where uh his son kind of is standing next to the Resolute desk, and he's telling President Trump to shut up.
Oh, wow. I
You're
hadn't
not
seen
in
that.
charge. You're not in charge. Be
Yeah.
quiet. Musk is the president.
Okay. Let's get into these government job layoffs and then we can move into immigration and DEI. So buyouts offer pay for about 8 months. Again, this is not something he mentioned on the campaign trail, but just came up in these last 30 days. Um, are these layoffs even enough to shrink the deficit enough and pull back the economy? Because I'm like, there has to be other more substantial ways. So going this route just seems unfruitful.
Yeah, it is. Um, their their principal goal is not is they they say that they want to shrink the deficit. Their primary goal is ideological.
Mm,
They want to shrink the very idea of the federal government as the entity that um, that is central to you know um, providing expertise and providing services for the American people.
wow.
That's their overarching goal. It's ideological. Um, it's funny that the largest federal budget or the agency with the largest federal budget, surprise, is the Department of Defense.
They never get cut.
They won't be touching the Department of Defense, I can tell you that.
They never get cut.
They will not be touching it. Um, their goal is um to go after, first of all, they're going after federal agencies across the board. Um, and they have connected sort of two things. One is this concern with, federal spending and this concern with DEI. They run together for them.
Right.
And, I think in my view, the sort of bigger picture in all of this is um, that what these cuts spell is a shift in the kind of ideological framework of American governance. Um, the New Deal and the kind of era of civil rights jurisprudence was all kind of meant to reproduce and sustain the idea of government as playing a role in sort of social stability at home. Um, and now the Trump administration with Musk kind of leading the way with Doge, they are challenging fundamentally that governing rationality. I think this administration and what they're promising to do is um, will spells the final sort of death knell or the end of a rationality that has been in one way or another central to the kind of fabric of American governance.
Yeah, and I think the rollbacks to diversity, equity, and inclusion has a lot of Black people specifically unnerved. So right on day one, January 20th, Trump signed an executive order to end, quote, radical and wasteful government and DEI programs. As you said earlier, he's warned about pulling federal funding from K through 12 schools and colleges who participate in diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are you hearing on the ground in terms of how people are receiving these rollbacks and how it's impacting their daily lives?
It's devastating. And you know, think about think about Head Start. Think about what Head Start means for and has meant for low income families.
Yeah,
This is a program that has stood in the gap when, folks, families, parents have to go to work. They got to make ends meet. Children need children, but at the same time, like, childcare costs are through the roof. Head Start fills a gap. It's filled an important gap.
right,
To cut it is essentially to leave those parents, those communities on their own.
right.
And then the interesting thing is, that, ultimately, I believe what we might what will happen. I think it's fair. It's consistent with the kind of broadly conservative ideology. Cut a government program, blame the people, blame some community or whatever, for failing to live up to some certain standards.
Yeah,
So then, it shouldn't be a surprise that when, you know, uh, kids in particular black kids in neighborhoods, different communities, um, when they, turn to crime or when they turn to, various like illicit behaviors and so on. And it's like, okay, well, there are no social programs and provisions to turn the tide,
yeah,
but provide a kind of framework of alternatives. That is
yeah,
a problem. And and then what fills in the gap? Cops, prisons.
right.
I mean, in some ways, I don't want to. I'm not one of those people who say we've been here before, because in some ways, in many ways, we're in unprecedented territory. At least in terms of the scale and scope of deregulation and disinvestment that we're facing. Um, but at the same time, I think what is tragic and alarming about what we're facing is um just the speed with which it's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah,
And we just have to we're gonna have to find ways to organize. Again, we were talking about mutual aid. We're gonna increase Communities are gonna increasingly rely on mutual aid and non-governmental agencies.
yeah, yeah. And just to tie off this bit on education, when I was at the inauguration, uh, one of his supporters said, education is important to me and reading books. And this person was not Black. And I was like, okay, so what do you think of the book ban? And he kind of gave me a roundabout answer that pointed to, well, we want them to learn, but just not that stuff. I was like, oh, it was very telling. And I go, why? What does it matter to you if they learn Black history? And he could not give me an answer. So I think some of it is this is the leader of the Republican Party. This is what he's saying. And we're all going to buy into that. And so, kind of what we were saying earlier about the ideological shift, in terms of you're in a position that could easily be construed as Black studies, political science, all the things that you cover. Are you okay? Has Amherst given you any sense of job security amid all of these DEI wars?
Yeah, I'm not worried about my job.
Oh,
Um,
okay,
I
good.
think the concern, and I say that because, at a private institution, um, the the question is to what extent can or will um, the federal government's kind of reach filter into kind of private institutions. I'm privileged because I'm at a place that is well endowed.
Yeah.
Um, but we're not immune at all from the crisis. So many concerns for me with the proposed Department of Education cuts. Um,
Dismantling.
yeah, and I'm particularly worried about enforcement mechanism uh, for various sort of titles that have to do with discrimination in higher ed. I'm concerned with admissions. I'm concerned with um, the coming broader assaults on the very idea of um, kind of diverse curriculum. I mean, the Trump administration so far has been quite vague about how exactly they're going
Right.
um to 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 reshape higher ed. So far, the most explicitly has been the talk about admissions, but the Dear Colleague letter that the Department of Ed put out just several days ago essentially broaden the target. I'm worried about public institutions are going to, I think, in the most immediate term, um, face the assault,
Yeah.
face the worst of the assault, and what that looks like. Will this mean? I mean, already we're saying, public institutions roll back um, promises around that they've made around, diverse hiring.
Yeah.
They've, rolling back sort of internal diversity programs at,
Yeah.
at at these particular institutions. So it's quite concerning, um and say nothing of the fact that um public institutions in red states, which public institutions in red states have already been facing
Yeah.
kind of yeah have already been facing assaults of various kinds. That'll only intensify.
Okay. Okay.
And the question is, um, is there any political will in the country to say enough is enough? When you come after when any sort of regime comes after experts, comes after knowledge, comes after history and historians and people who write and read and think about crises and who write and read and think about social problems and social phenomena, you come after those folks and delegitimize them, then we're in dark territory. So
What do
how do
you
people
think?
go
Go ahead.
ahead?
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, the question is how to keep alive the curiosity and thirst for knowledge in the absence of, or in the face of the state's abandonment
Mhm.
of higher education and institutions and networks of knowledge. That's going to be the big question. I think um, it'll be important going forward to figure out an inside outside approach. The reality is, particularly for Black folk, um, we've always been in and out of the academy. The whole history of Jim Crow in higher ed tells this story. Black
True.
scholars, Black professors, writers have found themselves at the edge, located in HBCUs or located in in institutions that are not affiliated with the university system.
Yeah.
We need to think about we need to think about how what lessons we might learn from the history.
Yeah. So two follow-ups from what you said. The first being, I'm interested in this. idea that you alluded to of a breaking point. And what do you think is going to be the enough is enough moment?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But what I sense is that um um people don't like to feel to be vulnerable. No one likes to be left at the mercy of circumstances that are beyond their control. No one likes that. And to the extent that people um can control it, or to the extent that people can fight to deal with that, I think there is a long history of people doing that. It's it's I think it is for me it is about trying to return to and think with some of the lessons from the past about how to survive in the face of abandonment and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And the reality is, of course, this is what we're talking about. The kind of immediate context is, that um, how do these things affect black people? Um, but the what is important to keep in mind is, like I said this earlier, black folk are but a barometer. There's there's no there's no reason as to why that the kind of abandonment will be to think that the abandonment will be limited to black folk, and that's not what's happening actually.
Yeah.
When you look at what the how the cuts, for example, and the sort of grant freezes are unfolding. You look at immigration, the assaults on immigrants suggest to us that um, again we need to think quite broadly and capaciously. I think like Robin Kelly, a historian, at UCLA, he says, solidarity is not a market exchange. And I think about that often. And our the kind of society that we live in impels us to be transactional about everything. I cannot help you because you you necessarily, or you might not be able to help me.
Right.
And we just need grace going forward. We need
Yeah.
grace, you know? And there is much to be said, and we were talking about this in the last conversation about,
Hmm.
you know, um the fact that so many immigrant communities um have are have anti-black views. We
Right.
gotta we gotta do a both
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, we we have to lean in and figure out, like, at the end of the day, the reality is like, if if a person is being made to be vulnerable and is being denied something, the question we have to always ask, at what point are they going to come for me?
Right.
At what point are they going to come for me? And that's my calculation. That's how I think. It's like, okay, well, we can deal with, and we must deal with the kind of the interpersonal uh dilemmas which arise from living in a society that is acculturated to anti-blackness. We can't help ourselves. Of
Right.
course. It's in the cultural framework. And at the same time, I know for a fact deep down in my soul that um people who have animus, it's a veil that is concealing a a deep and profound vulnerability. We all experience it, and no one likes it.
Yeah.
And any person you ask, even a Trump supporter, Anybody. They do not like the feeling of being vulnerable, of not having, not knowing how to make ends meet.
Yeah.
They cannot tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
They would be lying. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and looking for those connections of humanity is what history shows us a viable path forward. I like what you said, referring to our last conversation as far as fractures in the coalition are just often exploited by the impetus of the fracture. And so that conversation I'll link to in the description of this chat, y'all, so you can learn more about what me and Jared were just referring to. But I also wanted to ask, I'm interested in how you related the divestment from education, research, experts to the segregation era and the Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education, desegregating schools. So legally, Black students could attend any school they wanted, but it was a very slow rollout. It was a very uphill
Hmm.
battle, and yet it did happen. And so, what aspects of that, I guess, are can we replicate now in this era of resistance? What does that look like? What's giving you hope right now?
It it did happen, but it was a slow and long process of struggle.
Yeah,
I think part of uh the historical education that we need to be doing right now is to really think and reflect on how the the victories, the legal victories and the advancements and moments of progress, like how did they happen?
right. Slow
We
burn.
they and they happen not only slowly but through actual struggle, right? That through act people were actually organizing and making judgments in the context of their own, of the kind of historical situation in which they found themselves. And there is this kind of thing that is so pervasive in contemporary American culture of kind of talking about um, protest movements and traditions as though um, it's a matter of going from grievance to resolution. It's like, the civil rights movement is just, okay, yeah, it's a moment of triumph, you know, and
I'm
it
laughing at the
is.
laugh.
It is no, it is. I think it
You're
is
right
a
though.
pervasive. It is a pervasive kind
Yeah,
of feature of American political culture that we just the in between, right? How the sausage gets made is sort of left
right,
out of the story,
right,
and to incorporate it, to bring that story back in, to
right.
actually focus on how particular communities were organizing. You think about, for example, the Montgomery bus boycott.
Mm,
It is to me, a really powerful example of the day-to-day mutual aid struggle and organizing that is happening. We're talking about a boycott that is going on for months and months at a time.
yeah, a year, right? If I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
people had to figure out how they were going to get to work without getting on a bus. They're communicating with each other. There are
Right.
networks. There are networks of organization that were designed to keep people informed, to make sure that people were cared for, right? In other words, to stand in the gap. And
Yeah,
at the same time that you have that like kind of on the ground, kind of mutuality, you also have um you know, more formal, I guess, political struggle, folks who are negotiating
yeah,
uh with the powers that be.
yeah,
So I think we're going to need to develop as protests movement traditions in the past have developed
yeah.
multi-pronged approach. It's already there,
Both and I
we
think
have to do both and it also this also means I don't mean to ruffle the feathers too much with
go,
folks.
go.
I'm just saying, look, I we have to have a more antagonistic relationship to politicians.
Mm,
the Democratic Party, I'm not trying to be friends with them.
Okay.
And we
What's
should
your
not be
party of
trying to be,
choice?
huh?
What's your party of choice?
I tend to vote Democrat. Yep.
Oh, got you.
Or
Okay.
vote Democrat, and where I can, particularly in the primaries, to vote as left as I can. And
Okay.
then in the general election, I'm
Mhm.
Democrat. I vote Democrat. Um, the reality is like the I think we have these, and I think it's entirely coming out of the social media age. We have these um developed these parasocial relationships to politicians. And we like expect them to speak in the language of friendship, to speak in the language of like, okay, I have your back, I have whatever. And it's like,
Right.
I, as a citizen, I am trying to press you to do as much as you possibly can to not compromise before you even get in the room. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the the disposition. It's like how should voters, how should citizens think about their relationship to politicians? Like, okay, look, I'm trying to press you as hard as I can
Yeah.
and hold you accountable in public forums, at the ballot box, in any way that I can.
Yeah.
If and when those politicians fail to live up to what they're promising.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many I've got your back tweets I saw or statements in the State of the Union under the Biden administration. I'm like, okay, and how? Like, what is,
How do you have my back? That's
show
what I need
me,
to
not
know.
tell me.
Be an opposition party.
Yeah.
And it's hard, I was so upset a few weeks ago. Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader in
Yeah.
Congress, who's like, oh yeah, rulers have come and gone, but God is on the throne. I know that. Thank you. Thank
Hallelujah.
you.
That's true.
Hallelujah. Thank you. I love the Lord. He heard my cry. I need you. I need you to to stand up and be a
Mm.
politician. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I see this as part of like how so part of the like being developed. Okay, so developing an antagonistic relationship, a more antagonistic relationship to politicians,
Yeah.
organizing mutual aid,
Mm.
standing in the gap, negotiating where negotiation is feasible, um and workable. All of that, all of that needs to be happening at
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. And
Um,
using your same earlier example of the Montgomery bus boycott, it was also effective because of the solidarity and the mutual aid, um, in addition to impact cities bottom line by withholding their bus fare. And a contemporary example of that is, did you see Al Sharpton recently led a buy-in at a local Costco because they have like stood by their DEI policies. They said they're not about to roll them back when so many other corporations have. So I think, if history shows us actions like that have been effective, and I'm sure like Reverend Sharpton, he's always in these streets, so he's probably going to be doing more of that anyway. This was a very realist conversation. Your expertise is showing. Thank you so much, Jared. Before we go, I feel compelled to ask, is there anything Trump has done these first 30 days that you agree with?
no, I'm not. I don't.
Okay.
I I I I cannot begin to, you know, wrap my mind around just um how destructive he's been in just a few weeks,
Okay.
And I I find that, we have to, or at least for me anyway, I guess my moral calculation is elsewhere.
Hmm.
And I think about the good. and the resilience and the fight that has been, that's been happening far away from anything that this administration uh, can sort of lay claim to, you know. Like,
Okay.
I've been, particularly, I have friends, trans friends in particular, who are just like fearful,
Yeah.
and the networks of community care that have um, that have come out uh, that are arising from this moment have been inspiring, and I'll say this because I'm an academic,
Hmm.
uh, and because this interview is public, I I won't say what I the two words that I really want to say about Trump, but I will um I will say that my hope is that we will continue, we will disapprove, and that disapproval will actually expand and grow. I think that's the only hope, and that disapproval, of course, needs to be connected to real concrete
Yeah.
action, and not merely discourse. We gotta get out in the streets,
Yeah.
and broadly defined in whatever way that means, and however we can, if however we can. um yeah.
All right. We only have a couple minutes left, but it would be remiss of me not to ask about the Eric Adams saga because I am in New York City. So DOJ asked federal prosecutors to drop the bribery charges. This is all stuff you know, just updating the viewers. Four deputy mayors have resigned. This just in this week, and the New York governor recently like condemned all this nonsense that is going on. Okay, Jared Loggins, how concerned should New Yorkers be about Eric Adams or even the country at large? Because this is a prominent mayor of a big city.
um well, by all accounts, I was just reading in the New York Times this morning. Um, Folks have soured significantly on the Adams administration. I think I'm encouraged. I think pressure needs to stay up. I'm actually a bit surprised by the extent of the resignations.
Mm,
But I think that Adams, regardless of the kind of outward bluster, um, is concerned with legitimate his political legitimacy, and that political legitimacy is corroded when the deputy mayors underneath you resign in mass. Um, he is not immune from um, political inertia. He is not, and
it's
you know,
shocking to me that he's still running for re-election.
I don't. I think it is a that part I'm kind of not surprised by. I think it's
Oh,
it's,
okay.
it's total hubris.
Okay.
But that is how Adams. That's how he presents himself, though. It's
Yeah.
very, like, prideful. No one can do wrong to me, And now the emperor has no clothes, and it's up to us. It's up to New Yorkers, but I think it's up to us too to like push back against um the the message that this communicates, right? It's like, oh, uh politician can promise to do something in order to avoid prosecution, to get charges dropped for his corruption and bribery. I mean, if he can do that,
Right.
then what is the law?
Mm,
What and what is the law except just a way of saying, might makes right?
yeah.
So the other reason to push back against it is not, that first of all, he has been a mayor for elites. He's not been a mayor for everyday New Yorkers.
Mm,
It is not surprising that um, the city of New York voted for citizens in the city of New York voted for Trump in unprecedented ways.
That is true. Usually a blue stronghold, but they got cracked this past election. Certainly says,
Why did that happen?
yeah.
Part of the answer to that question is the Eric Adams administration. If you do not
Hmm.
provide the resources and the means for the people in your city to flourish, they're going to translate that in however way they can translate that.
True. Yep.
And that's exactly how Trump was able to win.
Yeah.
The people have been, I think it's important to keep in mind that not just in New York City, but across cities in the whole country. Um, Trump's got more support than he did back in 2016.
Right.
It's not relative to the kind of political demographics in these places. Relative to that, I mean, it's extensive. You got to ask what role does local government play in producing the discontent
Yeah.
that is in turn spelled out on a national stage in the national scene.
Yeah. And we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that over the next 4 years before the presidential election. Jared, thank you. I feel like at one point we were both guzzling water. So we
Oh
really
yeah, listen.
so I feel like we really dug into it. So thank you. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you back. I was interested in what you were saying about the criticisms of the Democratic Party and how we really need to be more antagonistic in general toward politicians so that we, the people, are actually being served. So
Exactly.
yeah, we'll have to do that sometime. Thank you, Jared Loggins.
Thank you.